AI keeps promising to fix the same three things: how we score interactions, how we coach off of them, and how we keep agents motivated day to day. This episode, we're testing whether it's actually delivering or just moving the same problems around. I'm your host, Cameron Liss, and this is The Rundown. Joining me is the one and only Michael Tamer, CEO of Proponisi, author of The 4-Minute Customer, and Scott Thomas, our CTO, one keeping an eye on the business case, the other on whether the technology actually holds up under it. Let's get into it. Our first topic is auto QA lies. Practitioners auditing AI generated QA recaps keep finding the same thing: generic coaching language, invented agent strengths, and feedback that contradicts the underlying scorecard. The vendors call it an edge case. The supervisors acting on the bad feedback call it something else. So the question that stems is, if AI QA tools hallucinate coaching feedback, should anyone trust an AI generated scorecard? Scott, I'll let you take the lead on this one.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to unpack here because when you're talking about AI and AI QA, a lot of times people are thinking, this is ChatGPT or something with a prompt, going through and reviewing the calls, and and then could potentially hallucinate or say something that's inaccurate. And really, I think when we talk about AI in the contact center, we're talking about a set of tools. I mean, AI is really only as good as the tools it has to use, and that's well beyond just a simple LLM that you're used to chatting with if you use ChatGPT as an example. And I think that's where if you don't have a pipeline that's got a RAG component where you can put outlier examples of golden examples of scoring for complex calls or outliers, or other tools to force certain things to be in a certain format, and not giving the freedom or flexibility for the AI to just state anything. There's controls that you can put in place. I think it's worse today than it'll ever be in the future, and there are new tools constantly coming out that help redirect and help you to take control over things like hallucination. And one of the key things for making sure your AI isn't hallucinating is making sure, along with the scores and the statements it's making, that it is providing real evidence as to why it's judging or scoring or making a statement to back that up, and that grounds the AI. Is it a problem? Is it going to happen? It can, yes, and there is a chance, but I think every day there's more solutions and technology coming out to do regression testing, to do ongoing testing, to strengthen and harden the boundaries that the AI has, to make it more and more accurate, where that becomes less and less of a risk.
Yeah, I love it. And I like that you made the point to acknowledge the distinction between, what is generalized as AI and then what the actual tools are that are being leveraged and how they can be coached and taught, similar to the agents that are going to be, used alongside the scorecard. But things like that has a starting point, and it has to be fed the information to get better and do better, and then identify and work off of that. And Michael, what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, should you trust an AI-generated scorecard? At Proponisi, Scott Thomas, we better be able to trust an AI scorecard that's generated. So that's his responsibility. So he's the guy that does that. And you know what? So I think the answer is yes. I think we missed the point that the biggest change that occurred in QM is not AI. It's the fact that we used to do 2% and now we're doing 100%. So we have so much more data that when you begin to hone in on a particular problem or an issue associated with it, we're so much farther ahead. And so now you're getting tremendous opportunity. And I know we need to look for problems. We need to be aware of those. But the reality is we're so much better off than we've ever been. And if And in the same instance, because of the way that it's set up, because it's doing basically yes, no, because it's so clear and concrete, you can have confidence in the AI scorecards. But you also all know that if you've worked with AI in any amount of time or any amount of effort, whether personally or professionally, it's not perfect. And if you don't have somebody's hand, some sort of a human touching it or analyzing it or looking at it, you're going to run into these issues. And if you're just sending off coaching to your employees without having some sort of human touch or interface in there that's focused on it, you're going to run into some sort of a problem. So I think I think you can trust an AI generated scorecard for Proponisi for sure. But I think in general, I think you really can trust them. But you need to check with your vendors and validate how they do it and what they're doing and how much testing they're doing. And you'll be able to tell by the depth of their answer as to whether that's something you can trust as well.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think, a question that kind of stems off of this one is you've put your trust into the 2 to 5% samples that a human is scoring. And obviously we're not perfect. Obviously we want to do as great of a job as we can. But when you throw AI into the mix and you start getting confident in building out your rubrics and setting it up for success, I think that, it will, as Scott had mentioned, at some point in time, surpass the human ability, flawlessly and effortlessly, and then become a real leverage point. So great points there. Segueing into our second topic, which is going to be BossBot. Algorithmic management already runs scheduling, adherence, and performance rankings in most large centers. Some platforms now trigger automated interventions without supervisor involvement. Research shows workers often rate algorithms as more consistent but less legitimate. So the question is, would agents rather be managed by a fair algorithm or a flawed human? Michael, what do you think?
I probably going to give more credit than people will expect me to do it, but I think that the algorithms that are used, as an example in scheduling, nobody wants manual scheduling back. Nobody wants a human involved in that. And the great part about an algorithm is it doesn't have a favorite. It's just doing what it's supposed to do. And again, if you look at quality, that's where we were. We had humans that were doing all of the work and all the biases associated with humans, and the fact that the person that's now doing QM used to sit next to me and we didn't get along very well, and they only took 4 out of the 700 or 800 calls that I had. So then just you didn't score it correctly, or any sort of calibration that we were doing. So that the algorithm doesn't have any of that, right? It doesn't have a bad Tuesday. It just needs to make sure that it's being scored correctly and that we're watching it and keeping track of it. So the unfairness that came from, that came from the human component of it is, was never related to the bias. It was more related to the fact that we just had such a small sampling, which is where the problem occurred. And so I think that the use of the algorithm, especially for communication and more touch, because we just don't have enough time, and the frontline needs more connection. They need more encouragement. They need more admonition. They need more recommendations. They need more coaching. They need all these things which AI will be able to help us do. And any sort of increase in contact is a plus. And of course, it's always balanced again. Well, we've got something else interfering with them. They're not getting enough time on the phone. So I think that bring on the algorithms. I love them.
Yeah, and I love that you hinted at the favoritism. I can only imagine how many people could attest to the times they've had their quote unquote favorite agent reach out last minute for a vacation they have to go to, or a wedding that popped up or something like that, and throwing a wrench in the schedule they've been, trying to get done by the timeline, and how much stress and curveballs it throws into them. So having the tireless AI that, doesn't work off of any of those humans connection systems, I think it does to an extent make it, where it's a repeatable, clean system that is obviously going to be more efficient to optimize and make the whole operation smoother. And Scott, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I guess that I would say would be that, when you're looking at this, I think the answer is both. I think that the AI can really help a supervisor uncover data that just would have been impossible, before. At Proponisi, we have tools that involve AI coaching and providing feedback, to agents. And some of the things that it's able to uncover, like, that Joe's had his 97th perfect CSAT score in a row, and being able to track that. Before AI, we didn't even really look at unstructured data as a supervisor. We're looking at numbers, we're looking at scores, what the roll-ups are from different things. But there's all this rich data that's happening in the conversation with the agent and the customers, with the agent and the supervisor. And now we can really get a handle on all of this data that used to be, overwhelming, because the supervisor just didn't have time to read through, verbatim comments that a customer said, or a transcript from a call. So now with AI being able to do that and to look for those kinds of details, it's really added a fresh layer of possibilities in the contact center. I mean, if you think about it, over the last 30 years, there's been, and I say this frequently, there's been an alarm or a whistle or a bell that goes off anytime an employee is doing something wrong. And now we finally have technology that can uncover all the wonderful things agents are doing that are right, as well as some things that they need improvement on. So, how would a supervisor in the past, or even an agent, know that maybe 10% of their calls are violation calls, and violation calls are what they struggle with? It increases their handle time by 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and there's a lot of difficulty in that. It would be really challenging to find that level of detail before this technology we have today is in place. So I think it's kind of a hybrid approach, where you still got your relationship with your supervisor. They're talking about maybe your career path, or what's working well, how they can help, what roadblocks they can remove. But then you've also got this very powerful solution through AI that's tracking everything, not just the bad things, not just being out of adherence or being late from a break, that really can encourage an employee on a daily basis. And we try to do that with Proponisi, is to make sure we point out some very interesting, unique things in a very tailor-made way, that's personalized, for every single agent in a contact center, and that they're getting that kind of treatment and that kind of experience, and then still have their supervisor to kind of work through other challenging things.
I love it. And I think y'all touched on some of the most important things that teams are looking for when it comes to contact centers and operations, is human connection and time. And I think the way this navigated was, it is a hybrid approach. With more time that we're getting leveraging these tools, we can strengthen that human connection and have that interaction that may get missed when supervisors or QA folks are distracted or burdened with having to go through so many samples. So having all of that data kind of provided to them on the front end gives them that ability to keep that human connection alive and strengthened, which I think
Hey, Cameron,
very important.
Cameron, I do want to make a point. I mean, why the sign up there says flawed human, I want to make sure that everybody understands the fact that Scott, who's delivering extraordinary information and does every week when we do this, he's actually sitting there and he does not have a hamstring that's attached to his body. So on a scale of 1 to 10, he's probably at a 12 in pain and still slinging it really well. So that is wisdom from a definitely flawed human, at least in the hamstring area. So it's a perfect connection. So
absolutely,
Scott, love you. So glad that you're still able to do this with us.
Yeah. It only hurts when I laugh. So
okay, we'll try to keep it at a minimum today then. And moving into our next topic, which I think is one of the most talked about topics as of right now in the industry, is the super agent. As AI absorbs routine contacts, the calls left for humans are complex, emotional, and high stakes. Some firms are responding with fewer agents at meaningfully higher pay. The frontline reps becomes a paid specialist if the easy volume actually disappears. So the question is the future a smaller workforce of highly paid super agents? Scott, you want to take the reins on this one?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things to think about. It's really no change from what we've seen over the last 20 years of how new technology comes in, it handles the easy calls, and the agents get stuck with more difficult calls. The IVR did that, chat channels and email responses sort of did that as well. And so it's continuing to happen with AI on the front line handling these calls. What's different today than when this happened in the past is the super agent really does have some superpowers through AI themselves. And when you think about AI-enabled knowledge base and having a real-time knowledge assistant when you're trying to handle these difficult calls, which is a product we have, by the way, that provides tremendous value when people are helping customers, and it makes them more efficient, and people can ramp up and learn things faster. That's the beauty of having the tool for the agent, and then having this AI that's a customer-facing experience. Because while they become more complex, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be more complex for the agent to handle them. If they've got a tool that it's got accurate, information and a knowledge base that it's pulling from that's up to date, and tools that can give them a copy paste response on how to do a complex scenario, like inserting a new SIM card in their mobile phone, or programming something on their computer that they have to do. The agent really becomes a super agent with the superpower of knowledge. So I think it is challenging, but again, it's not the kind of challenge that agents have seen in the past, with getting more difficult calls and having to do some sort of legacy search, Google search, to try to find policies and SOPs and help the customer. They're getting proactive messages pushed to them, or they can easily click and request certain things, and breathe a little easier at the end of the day with these more complicated calls that they're now handling.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think at the end of the day, too, everybody kind of wants their agents to be super agents, regardless of the tools being leveraged, is kind of the overall goal. And I think it kind of goes into being a repetition game. The more complex calls that you take on, the more proficient you'll get at handling them efficiently, getting those AHT down, and focusing on how to resolve all of those complex calls that do come in. And Michael, what do you think about that?
I think that that the headcount math is a little bit softer than most people think, and then there's a focus on the bench, which changes everything. So just start with staffing, right? So if AI absorbs all the routine contacts, that means what's left over is more complicated. More complicated means more variable AHT, which makes it a little bit harder to schedule. And so if it's a little harder to schedule, that means I need to provide a little more slack. So maybe I don't get quite as much reduction as I'm looking for. And then if I cut 40% of my staff and I start paying people more money, maybe I save something, maybe I didn't, but your turnover doesn't go to zero either, because the job's harder, which might make it more difficult to staff. And so there's a complication there. And then I think the one that's nobody really has an answer for is, where does the super agent come from? You can't hire tenure. And yes, KBS is going to help tremendously, but every expert I've ever met kind of started on the floor, worked their way through the easy calls, and they don't normally start right into a complex, emotional, high stakes conversation. And so what you've done is you basically just took your training ground, which was the area that you used to get people to that point. It's gone away. And if anything we've learned over the course of time is that the ability to be able to take somebody from zero and move them forward and get them up to speed is the entire game. And we continue to learn that with our KBS, that the earlier you put that component in, the better shot you've got of making people successful. So every resignation in the future of this super agent is the resignation of a super agent, which means that now I need a specialist, not necessarily a rep. So got to be aware of the ramp, got to be aware of the fact that be careful of what you ask for. It's that old adage that, you never have, everybody has the same amount of problems. They're just different. And this is going to present a different obstacle and challenge for contact centers.
I love the mention of the headcount math or whatever you had said there. I think it is something to keep into a factor because especially in the rant periods when you have people that are learning and needing those easier calls, setting them up for success on the front end, I think ultimately builds out, how long they stay around. And the longer they stay around, the more repetition they get, and it all flows into them becoming this specialist or this super agent. So as long as you're setting them up with the right tools to land there, I think that you're, on the right path to building out your army of super agents. And moving into our next topic is going to be tier 0. Mandatory bot first flows lift containment numbers and cut costs. Many enterprises quietly gate human access behind them. Customers with urgent or complex issues experience it as a toll booth, and the most loyal, highest value customers are often the ones most punished by the gate. The question is, should customers be forced through self service before they're allowed to reach a human? Michael, you want to go first on this one?
So the moment that you say forced, of course, I immediately want to say no, that you should never force, but that is the reality in which we live. There are functions and services that companies provide that they've chosen to have them serviced by, whether that be self-service or an IVR or maybe some future super bot connected with it. It's the measurement of whether they actually solve the problem or not that is really the answer to that question. If I can effectively do it faster and better for the customer, and the customer recognizes that it's faster and better, then we ought to keep doing it because it's cheaper. It's cheaper for us, and it's even cheaper for the client because they get things done really, really quickly. If it's not faster and better, then that opens a whole nother can of worms, which aren't related to anything other than the fact we're just delivering lousy service and the people hate it. And if the people hate it, there's a pretty good chance that they're then going to call back in. And so while I may get a check mark that I contained this particular call, I also got another one that's down the path that maybe they were more angry, and when they got back on the phone, it's taken us a little bit longer to overcome their issue, or maybe they had something else they couldn't get done. And I think the other thing that needs to be kept in mind, and I think is where our future is that there's a question that's asked at the end of almost every single contact center call. At least it's really good contact center practice, which is there anything else I can help you with? The reason we ask that question is if a customer called for 2 things, during the call they came up with a third one, probably want to answer it then so they don't have to call back. And if our containment isn't covering all the issues, which invariably it probably won't, then that marriage between containment and human, or human to containment, or whatever that combination is, that's ultimately the best answer. So should they be forced? No, but if you have really great business practice and you can do it faster and better, then they should be, and that's the correct way to do it.
Yeah, I think you hit it spot on. And something we mentioned last episode as well was the way customers view the journey and the siloed operations. And I think a big factor into this, and something that's important to note, is the self-service, while obviously isn't the most enjoyable part of the call, but is a main part in identifying the call, right? Before they're sent over to a rep, if it is going to be a complex call, they might want to get it routed to an agent that could be more proficient, whether it be a very specific need or something along those lines. So while I agree forcing is never the main priority there, but I do think depending on the system, it is sometimes a necessary step so that they can deliver that great service and meet those expectations that the client has. And hopefully, they're not too frustrated for the long hold time if they do, and then get routed to somebody that can be, proficient enough to knock it out of the park for them. And Scott, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it reminds me, I think it was Frontier Airlines several years back had pushed everyone away from phone entirely. So you had to go through social or email or chat, and there was a brutal backlash on that. But I don't think anyone's going to go that far today just yet. But containment really shouldn't feel like containment today with the modernization of IVRs, with some of the AI capabilities that are there, where you can have a conversational experience. I mean, I understand there's customers that or companies that are struggling with legacy systems and trying to make some of those changes, and that can be difficult to move up into a more modern approach. But I do think that's the future, where containment's just not going to feel like containment when you're talking to a voice that's asking you, to just explain what you need to do, getting you right to that component or that part of the IVR to make that decision or to do that action, and easily handle what you're trying to do pretty quickly. So I think more and more it's going to feel like a chat bot experience versus an IVR. There'll still be a need to come out to an employee, and that should also transfer a lot of the things and the actions that were happening, so the customer doesn't have to repeat themselves. But we really shouldn't have this terrible feeling of what we all know IVRs can be like, and what they're known for from the last 20 years or so, where there doesn't seem like there is a human in the loop. Sometimes that loop is so big you feel like you're just walking in circles before you find where that exit is to speak with an agent. I know there was a time where you hit zero, you're going to get an agent. Now in most IVRs, if you hit zero, you're not going to get an agent, because they're going to hide that from you and try not to give you that ability. But again, the technology should begin to start, clearing the path where the IVR doesn't feel like your father's IVR anymore, that it's a breath of fresh air and more of a conversation that, gets things done quickly.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think the big thing with the IVR systems is it's something we're all very accustomed to, right? Like you're mentioning pressing zero to get to an agent. I know a lot of times when I have to reach out to somebody, that's the first thing I'm pressing. I'm not even listening to the IVR because I just know I want to get where I'm trying to go. So I think it will be very interesting to see, as these new technologies get adopted, to see what teams end up doing to navigate that and give their customers a sense of relief. I think it'll be very refreshing once we kind of get that cleaned up to where it is kind of just a smooth routing system, as opposed to like a straight stop into that IVR conversation and then routing to get your resolution that you called for. And moving on to our next topic, which is a very interesting one, is accent eraser. Startups like Sanas sell AI that converts an offshore agent's accent into natural American English in real time. BPOs report fewer escalations and abuse. Critics call it digital whitewashing that caters to customers' prejudice. Supporters say it protects agents from bias they never deserved. So the question is real-time accent neutralization technology helpful or quietly offensive? Scott, looking forward to your thoughts on this one.
Well, look, I think this can be really challenging for a lot of reasons. It could just go wrong. Wait, let me take, I think I've got my.
Well done. Well done.
Again, I think this could go wrong pretty quickly, and that was kind of my attempt at an example of where technology could maybe go too far. But it is a great premise. I mean, if you can experience this, and there's a situation that's going to make the conversation clearer and easier for people to understand, I think that's good technology. I think it can make it easier for people on both sides of a phone call to be able to understand and hear things in a way that an accent doesn't necessarily get in the way when technology can do that. The problem is, I think when we sometimes implement a solution like this, we like to take it even further. And now, instead of it just being sort of this generic accent, we're trying to add in other sounds in the conversation, or where to insert a voice, or some of these other verbal non-word kind of cues that people give, like yes, to make sure people understand they're listening. Some of this technology tries to insert those things where it just becomes almost like a bad movie and unnatural. I think if you're kind of clear up front and maybe even announce that you're using a filter to try to help the conversation works a little smoother. That could even be something these organizations could consider, or these technology to use this technology. But I just think I've seen too many where it's taking it even further, where now, depending on what region you're calling from, they're going to try to give you a northern, accent if you're from New York, or try to mirror your accent so that it sounds like you're talking to someone, talking to yourself, basically, to try to make it sound more and more like you. These all sound like great ideas for a really bad, outcome, and maybe a crazy movie premise with all the different accents. But I think finding a way to break down barriers in communication so that both the customer and the agent can understand things in a clearer way, reducing noise and maybe filtering out some of the heavy accents that could get it in the way on both sides, is a smart approach and helpful. But again, how far are you going to take it? Are you going to disclose it? And is it going to seem unnatural to the customer? Especially when there's an emotional response, or you're trying to state something and show empathy in your voice. If your voice is altered too much, you won't even be able to convey that emotion.
Yeah, I think you hit it spot on there as well. And I think, at the end of the day, everyone wants to be understood, right? That's the main point of the conversation. And I think there's a right way to use it. Like, it sounds like a great idea in concept, but like you're mentioning, it can definitely land almost like what Michael had mentioned a couple episodes back on the creepy side. I think if I got a call and the agent sounded just like myself, it would completely throw me off and put a curveball in derail my entire conversation. Might end up being a little bit creepy. I do think it would be a great movie theme though. Michael, what are your thoughts on this?
I kind of have a different perspective on it. So these reports that have been published, and CSAT, HT escalations, all that kind of stuff that they've done, it's all coming from the companies, from the BPOs, and it doesn't make it fake information. It's just pretty pinpointed, right? So, and they show fewer escalations, fewer abusive calls. There's some agents at the sites that will tell you they prefer it. And it's real, and it definitely is an area that we ought to be focused on, the fact that this actually has a bunch of perspective where it is better. But notice what it actually says though. All of these reports will tell you that which is measuring the customer, it's not measuring the agent. So you've got the same person, the same skill, the same knowledge, the same script, but you change how they sound and the customer treats them better. That has nothing to do with agent performance. That's actually measuring the customer's prejudice, which I don't know. I mean, maybe that is a reflection of the fact that customers hearing it in a different voice makes it more positive from them. The number that I'd be interested in is, what does it say about attrition and employee satisfaction, and how do they actually feel about it? Because if it's generally protecting the agents, and it shows up because they're sticking around and they're happy about it, then that's a really good thing. And then I think the other thing from an agent perspective is this an opt-in tool or a job requirement to sound like someone else for 8 hours out of the day? Those are very, very different options. And until you understand that one, you don't necessarily know whether all this other data is really impacting them or not impacting them. I do know that anything that clears up communication is going to make things faster and better. If I understand what you're saying better, and I don't have to struggle. And yes, even if it sounds, it's been common professional communication to speak at the same gait or the same volume as the person that you're talking to, because it creates an environment for better communication. Anything that does better communication is usually going to be great, but obviously we need to be aware of all the people involved in the experience, both the customer and the employee, and obviously the company as well.
Yeah, and I think that was a great point, mentioning the fact that it is a grade on the customer, not necessarily the agent themselves. And I think at the end of the day, if customers are happier and agents are not having to deal with that existing prejudice or those hard times while they're working and trying to get their job accomplished, it sounds to me like it's almost a win all around, right? And I think that that is also going to be kind of the end goal. If we can leverage a tool that makes it easier to understand while also benefiting the agents, then everyone gets to be in the winning party. And moving on to topic number 6 is going to be AI therapists, another interesting one. With therapist shortages and month-long wait lists, millions already use chatbots for emotional support. Some clinical trials of purpose-built therapy bots show real symptom improvement. States have begun banning AI from representing itself as an AI therapist. So the question is, should AI chatbots be allowed to provide mental health support without a license? Michael, I'd love to hear your take on this one.
The comparison isn't the one that people are living. Your choice at 2 a.m. isn't between a chatbot and a licensed mental health person. It's between a chatbot or nothing. And it's been nothing for a really long time for a lot of people. And whether that's month-long waits or coverage gaps or all the other issues that are associated with it. So something being available at the actual moment that you need it, that has real value. But that's an argument about who's available. It's not an argument about license. And obviously, there are people much smarter than I am, that understand the license. And just because I've deflected something and put it into a machine doesn't mean that they actually solved anything or they actually made something occur. So this is one of those things which is it's not about whether it exists or whether it's fast. It's whether it's actually delivering what needs to get done and the people are getting taken care of. And so I don't think this is one of those replacements. I think this is one of those great examples of coming alongside. I mean, can you imagine a therapist that has worked with an AI and says, listen, you know what? If it's 2 a.m, give this a call. It's not me, but you can talk it through and I'll get the data and we can talk more and I get some sort of a summary on what you talked about. I mean, it's probably a really bad idea. Don't do it if you're not supposed to. But I just think this is an opportunity again for where the answer is going to be the combination of the two. And you know what? I've checked out the AI. They can give you some pretty good answers. So there you go.
Yeah, and I think the point about accessibility is really important to draw away from. Not everybody has a 24-hour availability, but if it is leveraged in a sense where they can get to somebody or talk to something at that point in time, then it may end up setting them up to get into that next conversation with that licensed professional, and then hopefully their symptoms will subside or they can get the help that they're needing. So I think that was a great way to frame it, is if it's an accessibility thing, then it can be leveraged and provide value, that it is definitely hitting the mark there. And Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, should AI chatbots be allowed to provide mental health support without a license? I mean, the question itself, it's already happening, to Michael's point. And even beyond AI, people are looking to TikTok or to YouTube and, lots of other channels of information where you can get it 24/7. And who knows what type of experience this, TikToker that's telling you, to go on an all carrot diet to help your mental health, whether that's going to, be true or not. I'd almost trust, ChatGPT's response over some of the other channels. When we feel bad or when we're having issues before AI, we Google it, and people would Google what's going on and try to find an answer. And everyone kind of also secretly joked that that's the worst thing you want to do, is try to look up on Google something about your health or something that's going on. But I think this is a slippery slope. It could be dangerous in some scenarios, and it has been dangerous, obviously, in some scenarios. One of the things we talk about with a lot of these AI tools is having a human in the loop. And if you're chatting with a chat bot at 2 a.m, and you're asking some questions, and then you're talking about some very serious issues that have serious repercussions. A lot of these tools don't have a human in the loop. It's not like it's going to escalate. You're still just relying on that, LLM or that chatbot. Whereas there's been other research with Therabot. I forgot the company that did that, but they had it where you could, chat with it, and they saw a 51% reduction in depression symptoms and 31% by anxiety. But there was always a human in the loop that was monitoring and also available, or could have some sort of rollover component. But again, I think it's a tool that people are going to use and are using it for mental health, for loneliness, for conversation, to bounce, things off of it. And we'll just have to see over time that the right guardrails are in place, and that there's other things that people can be made aware of, hopefully to know that they're chatting with a chat bot and it doesn't have all the information. And you do see that Anthropic and OpenAI do, when you start asking questions like that, make it very clear that it's not a therapist, it's not here to provide medical advice, but it can tell you this or have certain things. And sometimes that's all a person needs, like to Michael's point, um, at 3 a.m. So it's an
Scott, I can
interesting,
still,
discussion.
Scott, I can still call you though, even though there's AI. It's still okay for me to call you.
I've got you on my do not disturb list, so
favorites list.
I'll certainly take that call. Yes.
Absolutely. And you're mentioning of the TikTok professionals. It's an interesting perspective shift, because it almost brings up the question: if the AI therapist doesn't exist, is it then going to open the door to the danger of people resorting to listening to people who may not be the trusted professional? So I think it is, like you said, just a slippery slope. I think it does have the ability to provide some value, and it can definitely help some people, like Michael had said, at 2 o'clock in the morning. But it does need to have that human in the loop where, when things are getting serious and something that needs to be escalated outside of the AI's hands, that it can be delivered to the right person at the right time. And moving on to our last topic, we like to keep it light and fun for our 7th topic of the rundown. So this one is the algorithm ate TV. Reports revealed streamers asking writers to make shows comprehensible to viewers staring at their phones, with characters narrating their own actions. Critics called it the death of visual storytelling. Platforms called it data-driven design for how people actually watch. The question is second screen television ruining the art form, or just meeting viewers where they are? Scott, what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's definitely happening. I saw a statistic that 88% of Americans have a second device in their hand while watching TV. And I've got to admit, I kind of fall into that statistic in a way. One of the things for whatever reason, and I know this drives my wife crazy, but we're watching a show. I'll see an actor, the actor's familiar. I'll go on to IMDb, try to see what else the actor's been in. And for whatever reason, that's just something I can do and want to do. And then, hey, I can always back the show up and see what I've missed. But I did read an article where, people were actually writing scripts for shows to really spoon feed what's going on. So that if you're looking at that, second screen and you miss part of the dialogue or what's happening, but then you look up, they're going to repeat it. They're going to continue to say it. And it really is the dumbing down of entertainment. But I also think it's genius in a way, because a lot of people want to have that phone. If they feel like they're frustrated or they can't keep up with what's going on in the TV show, they might pause it, they might not watch it, but this at least guarantees that you can look at what's going on in your feed, and you can scroll and doom scroll and then still look back over and see what's going on between this couple, and whether they're fighting or they've made up, because they'll repeat it and restate it. But it's kind of sad. I mean, we finally invented television that you don't have to watch. And it just didn't necessarily kill storytelling. It just found out that not many of us were looking anymore. So they're trying something new, but it's kind of sad. I'll leave it with that.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah. I think it is. I like that you mentioned that it's a genius idea, though. I think that they were able to identify that it is happening and ongoing. I mean, I can attest myself, I fall into that statistic as well. I mean, I almost always have, if I'm not listening to something, I have something playing on a second screen that is just going on in the background. I feel like when I have a second break, it's something to turn away to, kind of distracts my mind from whatever I might be focusing on. But same boat as having a movie on. My wife's constantly watching TikToks and then always saying, "Oh, well, I'm listening to the movie. I know what's going on." And I, for one, when it comes to movies, I have to be sat down reading the subtitles. I have to be fully delved into the movie, know everything that's happening, or else I can't keep up with it whatsoever. So I think it is an interesting identification that it is ongoing, but I do think it has a little bit of the ability to take away from the art form. And Michael, what do you think?
Man, a couple of things. First off, it just scares me to death from a driving risk, because if you now can actually watch a TV show while you're driving, that can't be good for anyone. And I think I guess I'm most concerned that it's just not going to be as good. That it's just not as good. When I watch a movie, the sign for me that it's a great movie is if halfway through I look at my watch and hoping that it's not going to be almost over, because I'm really enjoying it and I really want to be involved in it. And so the second thing is that for me, watching a movie or watching TV is actually a way for me to dial it back, to dial down, to rest, to relax. And I got to tell you, that's really hard to do when you got a phone in your hand. And we've become a people or a world that just doesn't get bored anymore, right? Because there's no reason to be bored because we've got a phone in our hands. And so I guess I'm disappointed. I don't like it because I don't think the shows are as good. And then the other thing is if you remember, whether you're reading a book or watching a show, somebody would say to you, "Listen, you just got to stick with it," right? It starts a little bit slow, but the rest of it is really powerful, and you don't want to miss the beginning. And that level of concentration, that storytelling that draws you in and grabs you, that's going to be harder to do. And then finally, just shame on the both of you, and shame on me for not putting your stupid phone down while you're watching TV or you're watching a movie. It's pretty simple to do. You just set it down. And I'm in that same category as well. So anyway, there you go.
They kind of force you to do it at a movie theater. So
they do.
Yeah. I don't even know. The last time I even went to a movie theater, it is such a shame. I was looking forward to seeing the Odyssey. Don't know if either of y'all have seen that one yet, but I've heard the only way to watch it is in the theaters because it just doesn't do justice. And I think that's something that stands out to me a lot. And it's kind of funny that we mention it, but everyone's like, when a new movie comes out, they're like, it's something you have to see in the theaters, because I think it does give that full experience. And that's something that has definitely dialed down and been kind of washed out as, we have movies you're anticipating that go straight to streaming services. You don't even have to travel or go with your friends and family to see it anymore. And it is kind of, like I had mentioned previously, it is kind of taking away from that art form in a sense, at least on my side of that. But wrapping up this episode of The Rundown, we covered 7 topics, a lot of opinions, and hopefully a few things that were worth sharing with your friends, peers, and colleagues. If anything sparked a question or a debate, or you're interested in carrying on the conversation for any of these topics, feel free to reach out to either of us. We're on LinkedIn. You can DM the Proponisi page, or you can drop a comment on the YouTube. We'll be more than happy to check it out and get back with you. The feedback is very important. It helps us choose what topics we cover in our next episodes. If you found any value today, make sure you share it within their contact center to a leader, an ops director, a trainer, somebody who can find value in what we're sharing, and there's conversations worth having. Michael and Scott, as always, thank you guys for being here. Always a blast. And until next time, make sure you make today great. We'll see you on the next episode of The Rundown.
And if you're watching this, I hope you don't have your phone in your hand.
Yeah. And if you did have your phone in your hand, tell us how many times you picked it up and put it down.
That's
We're
right.
going to keep some stats.
There you go.
Or at least
we can dial back the content, right? We don't have to work as hard because nobody's paying attention anyway. There you go.
We can just mumble a little bit. Nobody will notice.
There you go.
All righty.